Gotta love it. All right. Well, she's figuring that out. I'll go ahead and get started. And if obviously, Aaron, if you got to do your thing, it's all good, man. It's gotta make the money, right? Pay the bills. That's right. So I'm gonna try to cover a pretty good chunk today because this next section really flows really well. So I was gonna try to cover 47 through 65, which is quite a few, but it's a really good. Hey, welcome back. So
Sorry.
this will be chapter two. Did you get your pick yours up, Darcy? Did you get it? Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. Then I won't have to pull up the screen, so it makes it a little bit easier for me.
Just
So
tell me what page we're on.
yeah, mine might be because I got the hardback. It might be a little bit different page wise, but it'll be chapter two. We'll be starting with 47. Mine's like 114. Wait, hold on. Wait, you know what? I've got a softback over here. Hold on. Ugh. Had to contort myself. Hold on. So 247. That's going to be page 109 for you on the softback paperback.
Perfect, got it.
All right. So, like I said, thanks again for joining, by the way. I really appreciate y'all because sometimes I'm like, even if I'm gonna do this myself, like, and it's just me and like, or Faith just hops on, that's fine. But I really appreciate you all because it means a lot to me and, helps me dive into and learn more. So, like, we're learning together, and kind of figuring this stuff out. So it's pretty cool. Um, but again, we're gonna do 47 through 65. This section is really about peace, attachment, and the restless mind. And I'm sure all of you have know, at least I can speak for myself for sure, that what it feels like to just like mentally spiral. And this really talks about this because Krishna is going to be describing um, obsession, attachment, frustration, anger, confusion, self-destruction. And it's honestly pretty wild how modern this section is through 47 and 65. That's kind of why as I was reading it and kind of getting everything together, I was like, I just kept going. And I was like, oh, I can't like just do like the whole rest of the chapter. We'll be here for like 2 hours. But I tried to cut it off at 65. But it is really, really cool section here. And again, the chapter is titled Contents of the Gita Summarized. So it's kind of like a massive like summary of what we're going to dive deeper into later on. But I did have a quote to cover. It's from Lao Tzu, which I'm not sure. He's the founder of Taoism, if you haven't heard of him. But the quote was, "He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty." So I think it really applies to this here because Krishna is about to explain one of the greatest battles, that it's not external. Of course, it's mastering the mind and the senses. And, we've been touching on that pretty much nonstop. There's obviously a theme through the Gita here. But we'll go ahead and dive in and read 47 through 50 here. So I'll go ahead and start. So 47. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. O Danyajaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their works are misers. And 50, a man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions, even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. So, what Krishna is talking about here, of course, is action without attachment. And so the big idea is you can control your effort, you can control your intention, you can control your consciousness, but you can't really fully control the outcomes or the reactions or results. Um, in fact, that's actually I get a lot of comments because 47 is actually at the bottom of my work email, where it's like I'm not basically I'm telling everybody like I'm just doing this to do this. I don't really care if you like, if you think I did a good job or didn't do a good job. I'm not doing it, for you all. I'm just doing my prescribed duty. This is my job. And so people, that's pretty cool. I've read the Gita before. But I'm like, I'm not the cause of it. I'm just doing that's my dharma. It's my work. It's my work at work. So, so 47's always hit me as like it's one to chew on. So even every time I see my email pop up, I reread it and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not trying to do this for my glory or anything. I'm just trying to do my prescribed duty. Um, but it's kind of like this section here kind of reminds me, well, and of course Teresa's not here, right? She had to plant some plants, so literally. So, but it's like imagine planting a garden. Of course, you can water it, you can care for it, you can nurture it, but you can't force the weather around it. That's really what this is about here. Krishna is teaching that you focus on sincere effort and not obsessive control over the outcome. And that's, of course, detachment. And even like me, and I'm sure Aaron can attest to this as a musician, I can practice faithfully. I can, you know, write a killer song or I think it's great, but I can't force anybody to love my music. I can do everything within my power to think I write a good, like this lick, this riff just rips. And people are like, no, man, that's not that's so good. But again, why are you doing it? I'm doing it. I'm not entitled to those fruits. So it's just kind of neat. In 47, Prabhupada's main point in the purport there is that we're entitled to the work, but again, not entitled to control the results. And he's repeatedly emphasizing that anxiety comes from fruitive mentality, as well as trying to enjoy or control the outcomes binds us materially. So in when I was going to therapy, one thing that the therapist would always say is, your past, you live in regret, and your future, you're living in anxiety because you're just constantly worrying about it. That's why you got to live in the present moment, in the now. And that's really what this is touching on because suffering comes from when we start obsessing and trying to control our outcomes instead of just sincerely focusing on our service and responsibilities. And Arjuna's non-participation in the battle, it's actually another side of attachment. Even though it seems like he's trying to detach from it, not want to be, it's actually another side of attachment because such attachment actually never leads one to a path of salvation or, liberation or whatever you want to call it. Any attachment, positive or negative, is a cause for bondage. And inaction is no bueno, of course. So work becomes spiritual when it is done as an offering rather than just purely for ego or reward. So that's it. Again, I think we kind of talked about that last session. It's like, why am I doing this? What is the purpose? What's the reasoning behind I'm doing it? Um, so that's just some food for thought there. And on 48, talks about you know, being steady in yoga. And the yoga, of course, is defined as equanimity, steadiness, spiritual balance, not just postures and exercise. That's only one type of yoga. Because yoga in the Gita often means learning to remain spiritually grounded, whether life goes your way or not. And that's really what bhakti yoga and what we'll dive into is talking about. And of course, in 49 and 50, we're talking about skill in action here. So, real intelligence means acting in Krishna consciousness and not selfishly chasing temporary results. Um, because oh, two people can do the exact same external work, but internally, if one acts from ego and anxiety while the other acts from service and spiritual consciousness, that's two totally different outcomes. Because if you're trying to follow your ego and you're riddled with anxiety, you're just gonna be let down every single time. and you have to have consciousness behind your actions. All right, let's look at 51 and through 53. So 51. All right. By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries, which is called by going back to Godhead. 52. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is going to be heard. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. So, talking about steady intelligence here, Krishna is describing freedom from confusion, clarity, and steadiness. And of course, as we all know, modern life constantly fragments our attention. We get the notifications nonstop. We get outrage, road rage. We get comparison to each other on social media or other people. There's endless stimulation, that's just going on in our face, and it's just nonstop. Um, but Krishna is describing a consciousness that becomes calm, focused, and internally steady. And of course, peace is difficult when the mind is constantly being pulled in 10 different directions. It's hard to steady your mind because no kind of material body anywhere within this universe can go on without miseries because of that. It's just our mind is trying to figure out how to control our mind from running rampant.
Can I ask you a question about
Yeah,
53?
yes.
Yeah,
You say 53?
yeah, on
Yeah.
53, the last one we read, is it we're saying like your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas? Is it saying like when you're no longer caught in the words of scripture, you're actually living it and what's that term called? A stream of consciousness?
So pretty
Stream of,
much. So I think we talked about it a little bit last time. So like the Vedas are a lot of it is ritualistic things to do and how to like it's for lack of a better comparison, like it's like almost like the Old Testament. You know what I mean?
okay,
It's like the real old ways of doing things and like he's basically it's telling you to do all these things but a lot of it's for material gain. It's not necessarily for a spiritual connection.
okay.
They're making these offerings to the demigods so we can have prosperity and do it's like it's really about that type of stuff. So that's why Krishna is saying, it's got all this like fancy, hey, you can do this. Look, I made this sacrifice and everything's cool, like, but all that flowery language really doesn't amount to much that and you have to get fixed in the trance of self-realization. You have to look within, not just trying to look out and connect, for personal gain. Because, of course, throughout this, he's also talking about ego and what you're doing your works for. Are you doing your works for to try to get something out of it, or are you doing it for another reason? So, does that
Yeah,
make sense?
okay. That make yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Thank you.
yeah. So in 52, 53, like we were talking about, it's talking about, and I think it's like a really cool description is the when your intelligence is passed out of the dense forest of delusion. I just picture like a black metal album cover, that's like just like black and white, and it's just like people out there, But that's what I see, and that's what it's just like such a cool visual in my mind because the in the purport it's heavily talked about here that confusion, of course, is caused by endless material desires and just constantly wanting and contradicting philosophies as well as mental agitation. Material life can be mentally noisy and confusing. I think we've all can attest to that. And we experience that, of course, with social media. You see the trends, the stuff that was popular when we were younger isn't popular now, but now my oldest son's wearing Jinkos, so I'm like, I don't know what the heck's going on. Like I mean it's everything's cyclical too, but you get on social media and then you're comparing yourself to people. There's endless opinions out there and it's nonstop. People are getting outraged over things, and it's just it's just not, it's just in our face a lot. And one thing that Krishna is describing here is a consciousness that becomes clear and steady instead of constantly overwhelmed. So, we have to know when we need to disconnect and cut that stuff off in order to calm our minds and silence our minds, to get steady consciousness because it can definitely be overwhelming, that's for sure. Um, so let's do 54 through 57. And Darcy, I don't know if you heard, I think you hadn't signed on yet. I'm like covering a bunch of stuff today. I was like trying to, because I just kept reading it. It was just like a bunch of stuff. So I was just like, wow.
No
So,
worries. Now I'm in it for the long haul,
all
friend.
right, cool. Thank you. So let's do 54 through 57. All right. So 54. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? The Supreme Personality Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties, really, varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be of pure transcendental consciousness. One who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. So Arjuna's just said, well, okay, you're telling me all this stuff. What does a spiritually steady person even look like? Like, describe him for me and I think this is such a cool section because it's like I said, he's basically like, well, what's it look like in real life? What is this? And I think it's cool too that, he's literally approaching God and saying, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what does this look like? And have the ability, that's one of the things I like about bhakti and like, Sanatana Dharma is it is encouraged to question, and you can even see it in the Gita. It's like, what is going on here? I don't know what do you want from me? What is this supposed to look like? And oftentimes we think that spiritually advanced people never feel emotion. But Krishna isn't describing somebody that's numb here. He's describing someone that's no longer controlled by every emotional wave. And I think an easy analogy to tie into that is, it's like the ocean. Waves still happen, but in the depths, remain calm. You go out to the deepest part of the sea and it's calm, but you've got all these waves up on top. It's pretty digestible that way. And Prabhupada's main point in 54 through 57 here in the purports is that a spiritually advanced person is, okay, like I said, not emotionally numb, but they're also not controlled by the material ups and downs of this life. And important clarification there. This is pretty important, I would say, for modern people like me and you all, is it's not describing somebody that's cold or detached from humanity. It's not saying, well, I'm just not going to feel anything and, be numb to it. He's describing someone whose inner stability no longer depends entirely on temporary external conditions. And I think that's pretty huge. And of course, it's easier said than done, but it's to be able to constantly remind, I know I have to do it all the time, constantly remind myself, like, does this matter in the grand scheme of things? Is this really that big of a deal, or am I making it a big deal? And I think it's good for us. That's where the self-reflection comes in. I think it's good for us to continually look within and see what things have power over us and what things are steering our ship of our life. Let's go on to 58 through 61. So 58, one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. The senses are so strong and imperious, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. And 61, one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. So I like the turtle analogy. That's pretty cool. In 58, one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within. Um, I mean, that's like us trying to focus when our phone's buzzing every 20 seconds. You have to withdraw from that because that's our modern sensory life that we're living in is just and I saw a meme that was really funny because it made me think of it. It's like when I first got my first Nokia, like I'd buy like the different ringtones, like, oh yeah, I got the Halloween theme ringtone. Do 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 do. I got a call, excuse me. Now my phone's probably been muted for like 10 years. Like I like I don't even think it's even, you know, I don't even know what ring I have on, if it's just like a normal ring or like the factory one, because as soon as I got it, I muted it. It's just, and even then it's still like buzzing, so I mean it's still distracting me and pulling me from it's just the sensory life that we live in. And the senses obviously are not evil, but if they're your uncontrolled mind and your uncontrolled senses, they can get dragged down by that stuff constantly. And if you aren't controlling your senses and focusing, then they obviously will control you, and you don't want that. Um, I think a practical example, of course, just kind of like what we were talking about is doom scrolling, people even with addictions, compulsive shopping, people seeking validation, um, social media comparisons, people spiraling angrily. I mean, there's so many things that I think we could all understand of our senses getting out of control. And I know I've done those things myself. I could check mark probably every box on that I've personally done just because, you know, we're just that's human nature and that's just living in it. But to constantly, like I said, constantly remind ourselves and self-realization that, okay, is this really that big of a deal? I need to let this go. And the senses, controlling your senses isn't a repression thing for its own sake. It's redirecting the consciousness towards Krishna or towards God and replacing this mundane taste for the material world for a higher taste, a spiritual taste of, a higher consciousness, so to speak. And it's like, I don't know, trying to control the senses without replacing it with something like spiritually is like like I said, when you're trying to use your phone and every notification's still coming on, and it's still pulling and dragging you away. But you'll hear Prabhupada talk if you like watch any of his commentary or read any of his things. One thing, there's a higher taste is pretty common through a lot of his like stuff because it comes right from the Gita. And I've just always thought that was like a cooler name. Plus, I think Shelter has a song called Higher Taste, which great punk band. If you're not familiar with them, Shelter's awesome. But anyway, that's like it's a massive theme through a lot of like the writings because he's constantly emphasizing real spiritual advancement and not just dry repression. It's you know like the whole quitting cold turkey. I mean that's like if you can do it, that's awesome, man. But I mean most people can't do that. You have to constantly be reminding yourself, okay, screwed up, let me try this again, let me try to move on. Even people naturally will give up lower things, mundane things like that when experiencing something spiritually higher. They tend to move into a different direction. And even like my kids when they were young, it was a lot better and a lot cheaper because I could just go to the dollar store and get them these cheap plastic toys that they could play with and put under the Christmas tree. And they're like, oh, this is awesome. And now they want more expensive things because those things don't, they've grown out of that. And that's just something you do in your spiritual life. And if you're progressing, you start to, these mundane things that are just kind of no benefit to me to grow and be a better person and more spiritually connected. I have to let go of some of these things. And it's not that difficult because you get the higher taste, your taste changes in what you want to feed yourself. Whether I don't want to doom scroll all the time. This is lame. Like maybe I'll read a book. Maybe I'll do something else, trying to replace it with things that are actually beneficial. But all right, let's read 60 through 61. Pop these two out real quick. Uh the senses 60. The senses are so strong. Wait, did I already read that one? Maybe not. Yeah, I think I already read that one. Sorry. So in 60, we're talking about the restless senses because they're strong and it's saying even like they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who's basically trying to control him because the mind and senses are powerful. I mean, it should be evident that the things you can convince yourself of like, oh my God, are they talking about me? Like, is that somebody like, and nothing's going on, but sometimes we're our own worst enemy. I mean, even intelligent people can be pulled away. Humility and practice are essential to growing through that. And that's one of the reasons I love the Gita is because it's incredibly realistic about the human mind. And Krishna never says, stop struggling, just stop struggling because that's not going to happen in this materialistic world. He knows it's a constant uphill battle. He says discipline, practice, spiritual focus, those things are necessary because the mind naturally wanders. In like a lot of Buddhist and traditions, they call it monkey mind, which is just really funny to me. Where because your mind's just like just like running all over the place. And how do you control your monkey mind? In a lot of Buddhist practices, they talk about that. But just a constant struggle of naturally trying to and just recorrecting yourself and getting you back on the track. So yeah, let's go on to 62, 63 because we didn't read those yet. So 62. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. 63. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So it's talking about the downward spiral. Little Nine Inch Nails reference there for you. Um, but this is probably one of the most psychologically profound sections of the Gita, honestly, because Krishna is literally mapping out fixation, attachment, desire, anger, delusion, confusion, destruction. It's just literally how you can snowball downward. And, it's even so, something like modern wise, I guess would be almost like a breakup. You start to develop the attachment for it, and then it's like, oh my gosh, and then you start lusting or getting like upset and like hyper focusing on like what whoa why did they break up with me and then from that you go to your anger phase, like well screw them, I don't want to be with them anyway, and then you start spiraling, you go to 63 and then it's like then a anger and then complete delusion arises, then you're like well maybe it was me, maybe it was, and then I mean you can literally see how this is the exact spiral for a breakup or somebody insulting you, or jealousy of somebody, social media comparison, I mean, like, just it's insane how modern that is when you really start to break it down of exactly how somebody falls down a spiral here back into material pool. And the mind just keeps feeding it until emotion completely takes over, and then you're just completely lost in it. Um, because what we repeatedly meditate and focus on eventually shapes our consciousness. So if you feed it good things, good things are going to start to arise out of you. If you start to, beat yourself up over things or kind of dive into things, it's just gonna, it's gonna pull you further down. Um, and like I said, this section here is really cool and pure gold, really. I mean, it's really neat. Because Prabhupada's talking about in the purports that contemplation creates attachment of course, and attachment creates lust or desire, and then you get frustrated by the desire and it turns to anger, and then it just starts destroying your intelligence and just repeatedly breaking you down. And that's why I've tried to some of like reading some of that, I've tried to limit myself even like on some political stuff because it's just like this current age just like really drags me down and like bums me out. And I get angry and then I'm like, well, what can I do? And then then I'm stuck and then I'm just like, it's just, and then you just get constantly frustrated and you're in a spiral and then you're bummed out, but the other side's not bummed because they don't care, so I'm the only one that's being impacted and affected, and that's not healthy for me. So it's to try to find the balance of making sure I'm looking out for myself, and I don't want that to constantly occupy my mind and drag me down to where I can't be beneficial to the people that are directly around me and that people that I can actively impact that are in my life daily. Um, but it's tough.
You are what you consume.
Huh?
You are what you consume.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Yeah, and that's why years ago I tried to started a practice of like in the mornings of trying to really focus and like read like positive things and tried to just like immerse myself so I can start the day off right and really set my intention for the day. And that's helped tremendously. I still do that today. I probably started like 7 years ago. And but just trying to set my intention for the day and start the ship off in the right direction, before I get to work. And then I'm just like working for the man, Dr. Toyota needs his money. So, but it's tough, but you have constantly have to check yourself and make sure you're in right mind. Um, all right, let's read 64 through 65 and finish this off here. So 64. All right. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. 65. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So the Krishna is talking about peace through regulation. Because Krishna is finally arriving at the inner peace. He's talking about clarity and stability. Because most people are trying to calm the world around them, and Krishna is teaching us to calm the consciousness within us, something that's actually within our control. Peace is not, of course, the absence of difficulty, but it's steadiness within it. So just trying to find that balance and try to not be swayed by things that are impacting us daily. Um, because again, peace is not material perfection or comfort or even escaping responsibility, and saying, I'm I don't have any responsibility. I'm at peace. That's not good. But peace comes through regulated senses, like we were talking about, spiritual consciousness, and connecting with Krishna. Because most people are trying to create peace by controlling the external world around them, and that's not how that works. You're just going to run yourself into a spiral. Real peace starts with mastering your inner world and working on yourself. Because, if you're broken, then a lot of times that stuff leaks onto other people, and that's not good. So it's good to focus on yourself and what you can control. I got five big themes here, just to recap everything here. So, five themes that I wrote down for this session was one, we control effort more than outcomes. Two, attachment creates anxiety, which that's a hard one to stomach. At least it was for me, because you feel like you're like, especially if you have to let go of somebody, because like a relationship or something, then it's like, oh well, this was like way better after I let go. I didn't realize that how much pain I was holding on to, or just like toxic. Three, the mind becomes shaped by what we repeatedly focus on. Of course, I think we've talked about that, and that's very evident of what we absorb ourselves with. Four, spiritual life is about inner steadiness, not emotional numbness. And I think that's important to um, that's difficult, but it's also important to note because I think a lot of times when people first read that, they just think, oh, well, detachment. Well, I just don't care about anything. Like, no, that's not what that is. That's something else. We won't even get into that. You're nihilistic people, but like it's okay to feel emotion. Emotions aren't bad, but we just can't let it shove you up against the rocks of like a giant wave. You have to be able to float and go with them and not let it impact your steadiness. And lastly, five, peace comes through disciplined consciousness. So, like I said, for me, I have to constantly remind myself, like, oh man, why am I getting so upset about this? Like, this is ridiculous, and just constantly keeping myself in check. And I think if there's one overarching insight that keeps repeating, of course, is consciousness matters more than external circumstances. So consciousness matters more than external circumstances. And that's probably the single biggest thread running through this entire section because being of steady mind is important. So I got a couple of discussion questions. We'll see, crack these open. We'll see what happens. So, how much suffering comes from attachment to outcomes?
Most of it,
Yeah.
all of it,
D, all the above. Yeah.
all of the above.
Yeah, and that's kind of, what do you think, Aaron?
My wife's one of the wisest people I know. She told me like a decade ago that the root of all heartache is expectations
Hmm.
or attachments. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just hard to let go of that. No, you know somebody that you've said struggled with anxiety of like you feel like you attaching to things, maybe you can help control them.
Mm.
It's really cool. I've not read these passages before. We covered a lot of subjects tonight.
Yeah.
I had to miss a
That's
couple
why I
starting.
was I started reading and I couldn't stop, and then I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna
Yeah,
now
I
you can
don't.
see why, because it's such a good section.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll shut up.
No, that's perfect. And that's one thing that I've always my little saying for that I've always had is attachment leads to or expectations lead to disappointment. That's what it
Mm,
is. That's been I've had to constantly remind myself of those things several times just because I mean that's just the way it is, because I'm like, oh, oh, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna go do this, and then it's like not awesome. And I'm like, oh man, I thought this was gonna be really cool, and then it's not cool. So it's like if you just kind of you almost have to you almost have to cheerleader yourself before you get there or do whatever you're doing, like whether it's playing a show, whether it's like, all right, I'm gonna knock today out of the park at work, got all these emails to catch up on and there whatever, and then it's like I didn't even get to check a single email because I was putting out fires all day, like what the heck, and I think it's more about, all right, I'm just gonna do the best I can today and we'll see how it goes. And then, I'm not saying set a low expectation. It's good to set goals because that's if you don't have goals and stuff to achieve and reach for, those are good things, but we also can't let it impact us when we don't achieve those things.
right.
So you kind of have to, I think it's also one of those things. That's why if you really read just like what we read, there's nothing that's like, do this, do this, do this. Nothing's like really because everybody's different. It's like what I'm gonna do personally is all right, I'm gonna I'm gonna go play this show and I'm just gonna like kick the person in the front row. They're gonna have a good time and then just like just rock out and just everybody's gonna think this is gonna be awesome. And then it doesn't go that way, then whatever. It's cool. I still got to play music, like but so it's kind of I may build it up and have the anticipation and expectations of what is going to happen, but I've been able to train myself enough to be like, dude, that was still fun. That one person that was there was awesome. And I mean, honestly, God, I just had, maybe I told you this, Aaron. I just had played an acoustic show like a month ago and set it up. Got this like real cool spot in Lexington that's above Broomwagon. It's called Lost and Found. It's just like a little event space. And so I'm like, oh, this is gonna be so cool. It's like all exposed brick walls. I'm like, this thing's gonna be like the vibe for like an acoustic show. And booked like three other acoustic people, two guys on tour, another local guy. And because there's like couches to, I mean, it's like a spot, like it's nice. One person showed up. And I even ran ads. I ran ads for this thing. You know, you get on Facebook, it's like foregoing 90 maybes or 90 interested, you know. So I'm like, oh, I might pack out this place, you know. And personally, one guy showed up and it was a buddy of mine, like that goes to all these shows. Like he goes to so many shows. And he showed up and at first, I'm like, because I had expectations, because I looked at the freaking Facebook event page, you know, it said 90 people, maybe, you know. So I'm like, hey, even if half of those people come, you know, and one person showed up, you know. So at first, I'm like, man, this is such a bummer, you know, because I was attached to the expectation. But it ended up being amazing because the other two guys as well as the local guy, it was basically it kind of reminded me of like the old people you see at like Peddler's Mall that like pick the guitars and stuff in the corner and everything because it's like we just sat around and talked about songwriting and everybody was like, "Hey, I wrote this new song. You want to maybe I'll try it out here." You're like, "Yeah," because you're just playing around a bunch of songwriters. And they're like, "Yeah, I would maybe change the course a little bit." Like that was awesome. Like, you know, and so we're just like giving each other feedback, and it was like one of the coolest experiences I ever had. You know, is just because it's we're just sitting around just talking music and just enjoying it. And then of course the one guy that came was like, this is the best concert I've ever been to in my life because I feel like I'm just like backstage and just like getting to witness like the songwriting and the, you know, we're talking about what the songs are and like why I wrote this and, you know, why I was super depressed when I wrote this acoustic song, you know, or whatever the case may be, you know. So I think it's okay, you know, I had the attachment, I had the expectations, and then of course the universe just swept the leg and knocked me on my ass. And then it was like, you know what? This can still be cool. So get your head in check, you know? And so it ended up like I had to change my mindset there and get myself in check. So I think it's we inadvertently create suffering, you know, because of our attachment to those outcomes, you know, but we can also we also have the power and the strength to be able to flip the script, you know, even during that stuff, you know, to be able to be like, man, this really blows. But it's okay. That's okay. It's going to be a good rest of the day, you know, or whatever the case. You know, you can really flip the script, but it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. Like I said, easier said than done. But you know,
Right.
back when my anxiety was really, really bad, and I'd have like the shakes and stuff, I would literally have to like talk to myself, you know. I'm sure people probably thought I was nuts, but I didn't care. I was self-helping myself. But, you know, I mean, you have to. I had to be like, dude, this is not real. Shut up. Like, you know, and try to focus on what is going on right now. Nothing's going on. Okay, then calm down. You know, so I think it's good to talk to yourself and kind of coach yourself for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, it sounds like you found a healthy balance of just enough expectation to have motivation and excitement, like to feel some
Yeah.
joy, but not be attached to it if it doesn't come through.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, it takes practice, you know, and I mean, it's like it's a lot, but it can be done. And I still do it, you know. Like I said, I literally that was like not even a month ago that show, you know, and I was just like, you know, hey, but oh, hello. My oldest just got here. He just got off work. But yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. But I think like I said, I still have to practice it. It's still a lot, you know. I mean, but I think that's just being human. You just that's gonna be the never ending story. Yeah. You know? That's just part of being a just part of being human. It's like that's what we're gonna have to do. You know? So and my therapist even made a comment one time that, and I think we talked about this before, Aaron, is like you'll never be able to eliminate anxiety. You just eliminate the spikes and longevity. So that's all you can try to eliminate. So if you get that stuff under control where it's like, I'm okay, I'm good, but felt that, but I'm okay, you know, like that's really the key. And that's again, that's working within yourself and self-realization and keeping your senses detached and controlling your mind from those things. So, all right, got another question here. Let's see. Can peace exist even when life is difficult?
That hits for me a lot right now because I'm not so sure.
Hmm.
In theory and hopefulness, but maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say it depends on what season of life you're in when you ask somebody that question. It's like if I
Well,
was just paid, I paid all my bills, like, oh, there we go. Oh, this is difficult. I had to write some checks, like everything's fine though, but then it's like if you're two payments behind, and it's like I'm not feeling peace right now. I mean, that's real. I
I
mean,
found out last Monday that because I'm in human resources, which is the pit,
yeah.
but I found out that we're laying off our entire workforce, and then me after I'm done laying them all off.
Oh
So
my,
we triggered the warn because of how big it is. So like we had to give them 60 days, and it's just a fucking nightmare. And I'm trying to figure out how I can become that safe space for my employees as they transition to their new things. And these are not high paid positions, these are like $17 an hour positions. So like
sure.
this hits for them much harder than it would for me. And it's like, okay, how do I remain peaceful when my job's going away too? I've been there for 14 years.
Yeah.
Like I went this weekend to the Plaything Festival because I was like, I need to do something to fill up my cup because it's important to me to be there for them. But how do I show up with that when I'm just as chaotic?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
that's tough. And it's
So
funny because I think
this
that's
hits.
yeah, I think that's the way that like even Toyota is getting like kind of rid of our HR department. Now we just have like a QR code that we scan and you have to put a question in, and somebody will get back to you,
Yeah,
and
if they ever do.
yeah, yeah. So I mean it's really interesting to see that stuff. But yeah, to your point though, it's how do you remain calm to be like, hey, I'm leaving too. But I mean, I think that would be to me, that would be my play. If I'm in your shoes, it's like, listen, I'm in the same boat as you, so we're in this
Yeah.
together, but like, let's get through this because there's going to be no benefit for you to get upset. I didn't do it because I'm leaving too.
We're
You
all
know?
going. And I do think that's kind of helps a little bit. And I got a little snippy with my new boss who I talked to like two times because it's all corporate bullshit.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, okay, we're staying in this building regardless for the next 2 months. You're going to give me a budget. I'm going to be able to do some sort of engagement things. I was going, I'm going to do the best I can to keep this not becoming a nightmare,
Oh yeah.
a complete HR nightmare, because it's like you've got people in this building that don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, understandable.
yeah, and like you can't fault them for it. And it's like, how do you expect to get work out of these people? And we're outsourcing, so half of the people are let go. Half of the people have been offered a job at this new scum sucking outsourcing company.
Yeah.
And like it's funny because like it's quite obvious that it's set up to where they're going to go. They're going to teach a bunch of people how to do it, and then they're going to be fired. And it's just messy. And it's just like, man, I'm sorry, you all. Like this is poor choices at the top that have affected the bottom, and it sucks.
Yeah, that's awful. But I mean, I guess to the point of the question, can peace exist even when life's difficult? I think it's I think it's possible, but it's not easy. I think you
Mhm.
can again, I think you even said like sounds good on paper, like I mean, and that's totally true. Because again, I think it's okay to feel emotions. I mean, you want to feel emotions. You don't want to bury stuff. That's not healthy, right? So, but if it's like, oh my God, and actually, I was kind of in a similar spot whenever I first started at Toyota because they put a hiring freeze on 2 months before I was supposed to get hired full time. And so they were going to let go of all the temporary workforce. And I was like, I just worked here 2 years to try to get hired on, and now you're going to let me go. And of course, I was livid. And I was not in the same mindset I am now. I was a lot younger. That was like 17
You've
years ago.
evolved since.
Yes, yeah. It's been a minute. But I just remember being like felt like I was like slighted by the company, like I worked busted my tail for 2 years, did all this stuff, and now I got to go find a job. I just had a kid. Like Bane was only like 2 years old then, and so I'm like, oh my God, man, like what am I gonna do? Like, but I didn't free. I even then, like I didn't free. I freaked out for a little bit, obviously, but then I'm like, all right, what do I got to do? All right, I need to start looking for jobs, and like the right thing will come along. Maybe I just wasn't meant to be there. Maybe I needed to be. And I don't know if that's talking yourself off of a cliff, but like I didn't get worked up, after that. It's like it's going to work out. And long story short, I ended up getting hired. Like I was the last group to get hired before they actually put the freeze on. So, I mean, it ended up working out, but um
Mhm.
there's people behind me. Same thing. There was a company that came in, third party, and some people transitioned to them and started working for them, and then Toyota was like, oh, yeah, we'll hire you once we start hiring again. And they never did. So I mean, but that's just corporate life, that's unfortunately. So,
Yep.
but I think, like I said, I think you can have peace, but if you're in the middle of it and I'm like, all right, like, you know, I'm like even when like my grandma or my grandfather was really sick, it's like, this really sucks, like this is really difficult to deal with, but they lived a good life, they lived it to the fullest. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. I'm thankful for that. I'm still bummed. I don't want to lose my grandfather. Don't want to lose my grandma. But I think it's and again, I'm probably sound like a nut, but like just even talking to myself, and comforting myself, because it's really, I'm just talking internally to my soul, really. It's like, listen, everything's okay, bud. Everything's okay in there, okay? Like you're gonna get through this. And so I think it can be, but it's very difficult. But
Yeah, it's that old
Well,
meditation cliche of the sun is still shining in a rainstorm. You just can't see it behind the clouds, right? So it's
hmm
there,
yeah.
just can't feel it in a storm. But when I first started looking into meditation like 15 years ago, there was an interview with a Buddhist monk, and he said something that really impacted me because I thought the same silly thing that we all think when we get into it, that meditation is what makes you peaceful, and, like creates calm. And
hmm
he was saying, meditation isn't to go find like a nice spot next to a creek and sitting amongst the flowers. Meditation is meant to be a challenge in amongst the noise. Like go practice meditation downtown in a city where
hmm
it's extremely difficult. It isn't to escape the chaos; it's to sit in the chaos. And that changed how I thought about meditation. So the answer to your question is yes, but doing that is like seeing the sunshine in a storm. It's
Yeah.
so impossible, but it's there.
Well, and I've been
kind of going
to,
back to the initial, where, we're talking about like, okay, yeah, there's terrible things, but when we're not attached to the outcome of it,
hmm
we can still show that compassion, that level of, emotion and give a shit, but not to the point where it's detrimental to your own health or your own situation.
yeah, absolutely.
Look
And,
at that, the Gita making stuff into sense.
one thing that kind of reminded me of Aaron, what you said was there's a Shambhala meditation center here in Lexington, and they're like Tibetan monk following, like, Buddhist. And when I first, probably about 6 years ago, maybe even 7 years ago, when I first started getting into meditation, I went there and did like a one-on-one, and they meditate with their eyes open. That's how they train.
Huh.
And it's because of the reasons that you said,
Mm.
because they're like, it's very difficult to master at first. They said, when you first start off, you're just staring at like a speck on the ground. And then you slowly start to work your way up to something a little bit further until eventually you're staring at something, just straight ahead. So they said that way, once you master that, you could be at work, you feel overwhelmed, you can just stare at your computer screen and you're meditating. and nobody thinks any different of it when you're at work, because you're looking at your screen, and so that's really what they teach. And it was very fascinating, and it's very difficult. But it's the thought process is very good. And in fact, the lady that I kind of did a one-on-one with me teaching me that, I was like, "How long you been practicing?" And she's like, "About 30 years." I was like, "Oh, so you probably do this all the time." She was like, "Oh no, I still can't do it." I'm like, "What?" So I mean, that was also encouraging to be like, "Oh, well, I have some lady that's been practicing for 30 years, like Shambhala style meditation, and she still struggles." And she was telling me a story, kind of, like the rolling brook type thing. I think she went somewhere in India or Nepal or something, was meditating with a teacher. And she was like, it was awesome because like the breeze was coming in. I was sitting there. She was like, I just started to look out the window and I was like, she was like, I thought for sure I was meditating. I was just watching this bird and I was just zoned in on this bird. And he slapped me on the back of the head, was like, focus. He's like, I was meditating. He's like, no, you're not. You're looking at the bird. You're thinking about the bird. You're not supposed to be thinking about anything, you know? So, it's even sometimes I think, you know, that's why I think that was their point is why it's more difficult to meditate with your eyes closed because your mind wanders more. If you've got your eyes open and you're focused on a single dot, like on a wall or something, then you're focused on that. You're hyper focused on it.
Hmm.
But anyway, just it was kind of neat and kind of reminded me of that. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty cool with chapter one and chapter beginning of this chapter. Krishna, of course, is begins it by teaching how we're not the body, and of course now we're talking about in this section he's teaching us how to stop being controlled by a restless mind. So, pretty interested. I think we'll be able to knock out and finish out chapter two next session, and then start to move into three. And I'm trying to remember see what three is here. But oh yeah, three we get into karma yoga. So that'll be an interesting one. We'll dive into three. And I may try to reach out to a couple friends and see if somebody wants to kind of like what we did in between one and two, have a little guest speaker and see that way you guys can ask any questions and stuff of somebody that's way more knowledgeable than I am, So and that always makes it cool because I kind of sometimes people ask questions, and as Aaron knows, I try to get answers to them and stuff. But um, if there's a question that comes up that even you're like, Jeremiah did all right, but I'm going to ask somebody that's more knowledgeable. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You know what I mean? Because that's why I just said I'm learning with you. We're learning together, so it's pretty cool. But
Well, these meetings are like your acoustic show you put on. It's a nice intimate thing where we're all kind of
yeah,
practicing a song together. It's great.
that's right. Yeah, and I honestly I love it. I always look forward to these because we can just kind of like chat and talk about these cool concepts and things within the Gita.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody have any
A work
questions
in
or
progress.
anything? Any questions, comments before we close out?
I'm grateful. Thanks for being here. This is cool. I know so little. I'm learning so much. I also didn't know that we've done the physical side, the Western side of yoga, where it's a workout, and I've heard from Eastern philosophers of how like we're approaching yoga incorrectly. So seeing you talk about yoga
Yeah.
completely as a mental state is all new to me. This is interesting to learn about.
Yeah. And I mean, there is like yoga of the body, but there's yoga of the mind. We'll get into it, but there's multiple yogas. You know what I mean? And of course, the one that just happened to get over on our shores is the one that's for body, stretching and connecting with your mind, with your body, but it's bigger than that.
Yeah, it's what I'm picking up here through
Yeah,
context. I've always approached yoga as a workout and not a spiritual connection. I mean, I guess connecting to breath, but then also a
sure.
workout. I've seen philosophers say how that's the wrong approach. It's not a workout, it's aligning your body to spirit. And
Hmm.
I just never approached it that way. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah, it's
cool
pretty
hearing these
interesting.
terms. Yeah, I've never heard bhakti yoga before, so I'm interested to get into this.
Yeah. Awesome. Everybody else good? No questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. I won't take any more of your time. So, and we'll see
Well,
you
thanks for
in,
hosting this, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Thanks again for coming out. Appreciate y'all so much.